Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a localized airspace breach that quickly triggered a massive continent-wide security alert. We're going to look at how a single drone incident in Eastern Europe sparked this complex chain reaction, one that drew in NATO commanders, neighboring nations, and eventually put critical civilian infrastructure on high alert. You see, modern conflicts rarely stay neatly contained within their borders anymore, and the speed at which a single stray drone can escalate international tensions is honestly staggering. So we're going to trace this whole incident from the moment the alarms first sounded, all the way out to the broader geopolitical shockwaves felt right across Europe. Okay, let's dive into this. That right there is the central question we're exploring today. What actually happens when unmanned aerial vehicles, drones, stray from their intended conflict zones and breach the airspace of military alliances like NATO? Well, the stakes instantly skyrocket. It's no longer just a simple border dispute or a quick navigational error. It becomes an immediate, real-time test of rapid military response, regional stability, and international security protocols. Suddenly, defense ministries have to figure out, is this an accident, an intelligence gathering mission, or an intentional provocation? The buffer zone totally vanishes, and countries are forced to react in literally minutes to avoid a potentially devastating escalation. Starting off with Section 1, the incident. Let's look at the micro level, focusing on that drone intercepted over Latvia. So early on a Friday morning, the Latvian military reports a serious breach. An unidentified, unmanned aerial vehicle crossed the border from the east, entering Latvian airspace. Now consider the intense reality of this moment. We're talking about a highly militarized border. In response, NATO fighter jets, which were operating as part of an allied air defense mission, were immediately scrambled to intercept and shoot down the drone. The pilots in those jets, and the commanders on the ground, had to make split-second decisions. They didn't know if the drone was armed, if it was gathering intel, or if it was simply a technical glitch. They just knew they had to neutralize the threat right then and there. Following the interception, Latvia lifted a regional air threat alert. But crucially, authorities couldn't immediately identify the specific details of the drone or its exact origin. Now, what's really interesting here is the search effort that followed. You might think finding a downed aircraft with modern military technology is a walk in the park, right? Well, listen to how authorities describe the potential crash site. Highly forested, with relatively sparse farmsteads, filled with forests, bogs, and varying types of vegetation. Imagine trying to find a needle in a haystack, except the haystack is a rugged, hostile, and physically demanding environment. This completely changes the dynamic. It tells us that even after a successful high-tech military interception in the sky, securing the actual physical wreckage on the ground is an incredibly challenging task. And until they find those pieces, investigators are essentially flying blind, unable to definitively prove where the drone came from, who launched it, or what its ultimate mission was. Moving on to Section 2, Regional Reactions. Let's look at the meso level and the immediate precautionary measures taken. Because, news of this interception traveled incredibly fast, and the reactions from neighboring nations were swift and severe. Finland immediately implemented precautionary measures, temporarily restricting both aviation and maritime traffic in the eastern Gulf of Finland. To understand why Finland reacted with such speed, you really have to look at their unique geopolitical position. They share a massive 830-mile border with Russia and are a recent addition to the NATO alliance, meaning they're operating under a state of hyper-vigilance. Shutting down traffic in the Gulf isn't just some small administrative move. It's a major logistical disruption, done out of sheer caution to protect civilians and ensure authorities have a completely clear theater to respond effectively to any potential drone threats heading their way. And this brilliantly illustrates how military tension inevitably bleeds into everyday civilian life. In the wake of the Latvian incident, the northern NATO neighbors and Baltic states immediately began tightening security. But they weren't just guarding military bases. They locked down the absolute essentials of daily survival: water via dams, electricity via power plants, and fuel via natural gas pipelines. If you're a citizen living in one of these countries, the threat is no longer just an abstract blip on a military radar. It's a very real threat to your ability to heat your home, turn on your lights, or get clean water from your tap. The anxiety shifts from the borders directly to the foundational resources that keep society functioning. Now, the underlying reason for the sudden intense focus on infrastructure security is rooted in a very specific anxiety reported by regional authorities. The Baltic states heightened their security due to increasing concerns about a potential false flag attack on their territory using Ukrainian drones. Essentially, a false flag is an act committed with the intent of disguising the actual source of responsibility and blaming another party. So authorities were worried that an adversary might deliberately crash a drone designed to look like it belonged to someone else, all to provoke a completely unwarranted conflict. This really highlights the deep climate of paranoia, the heavy fog of war, and the incredibly complex, multi-layered anxieties that leaders are currently navigating. Which brings us to Section 3, the wider pattern. Zooming out to the macro level, we're looking at a truly chaotic week of aerial intrusions. Let's move to the timeline and see how this builds. Because when you lay it all out, you realize this wasn't an isolated mistake. Over the course of just a few days, a wider pattern emerges. On Monday, French fighter jets assigned to NATO's Baltic air policing mission shot down a drone in Latvian airspace, reportedly the very first time the alliance's rapid reaction force had destroyed a stray drone over the country. Then, by Thursday nights, Russia was intercepting drones within its own territory. And then Friday morning brings the second Latvian interception. We're looking at a rapid, escalating pattern of airborne intrusions across multiple international borders. It paints a picture of skies that are becoming increasingly crowded, chaotic, and dangerous. 15. Now, that is a striking number. That's how many drones Russian authorities claim to have shot down overnight during that Thursday event. This wasn't a single stray aircraft getting lost in the wind. It was a coordinated swarm requiring a massive, sustained air defense response. When you jump from a single rogue drone to 15 in one night, it fundamentally changes the nature of the threat, from an accidental spillover to a deliberate, large-scale operation. To really understand the true weight of that number, we have to look at the geography. Those 15 drones were intercepted in the Leningrad region. This area is strategically vital, located dangerously close to the borders of Finland and Estonia, both of which are NATO members. But beyond the military proximity, this region is home to St. Petersburg, Russia's second-largest city. It's a massive economic lifeline and a primary export hub. A drone swarm here isn't just a military nuisance. It is deeply destabilizing to major economic choke points. Disruptions in a region like this can send immediate ripples through global energy and export markets, proving that these aerial incursions are threatening both national security and economic stability. Let's transition to our final section, a continent on alert. We're looking at Europe's growing infrastructure anxieties. Because as this drone warfare continues, the spillover is profoundly affecting major Western European nations that are miles away from the front lines. Take a look at these two recent incidents in Germany. German authorities discovered an explosives-laden drone at Leipzig airport. And over at Hanover airport, civilian flight operations were entirely disrupted simply because a drone entered restricted airspace. Think about the sheer asymmetry of modern warfare here. A multi-billion-dollar international airport, bustling with civilian travelers, brought to a complete standstill by a cheap, unauthorized piece of plastic entering its airspace. It perfectly encapsulates how fragile massive civilian transit hubs are when faced with the direct consequences of this entirely new era of warfare. So the crucial point is that the footprint of this conflict is expanding in wild, unpredictable ways, and literally no country is fully insulated. Just days prior to the Baltic incidents, Bulgaria took the serious diplomatic step of summoning the Ukrainian ambassador after an explosive-laden drone crashed uncomfortably close to a strategic pipeline used by Ukraine's military. This perfectly illustrates how modern conflicts simply cannot be contained by traditional borders anymore. Supply lines stretch across continents, and a non-combatant nation like Bulgaria suddenly gets dragged into the mess simply because of where a piece of strategic infrastructure happens to be located. It's a stark reminder that the logistics supporting a conflict are increasingly finding themselves right in the crosshairs. Which leaves us with this final pressing thought. As we've seen from Latvia to Finland, from Germany to Bulgaria, drone warfare is no longer contained to a neat little battlefield. It's actively spilling over borders, shutting down major civilian airports, and forcing sovereign nations to literally guard their water and power supplies. As this technology becomes even cheaper and more prevalent, what are the future implications for the security of Europe's airspace? Are these rapid, high-stakes military interceptions the new normal we just have to live with? It's a complex, evolving puzzle, and one that defense ministries across the globe are scrambling to solve before the next alarm sounds. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning what you see on the horizon.